He thought training with a legendary quarterback would change his life, but instead, it nearly destroyed him. This is the story of a young athlete chasing greatness, only to walk straight into a mentorship that isn't what it seems. What begins as a dream opportunity at an exclusive training camp slowly twists into manipulation, pressure, and a disturbing breakdown of trust between a hopeful player and the man he idolizes. Stay till the end to see how a promising journey for glory turns into a nightmare disguised as guidance, and how far one mentor will go to shape the perfect prodigy. It all begins on a random Saturday evening in the distant past, with young Cameron K. Jr., the protagonist, watching the USFF Championship Finals between the San Antonio Saviors and their opponent. During a pause, young Cameron watches the TV host say all the good things about his GOAT, Savior quarterback Isaiah White, as his dad, Cameron Sr., shows up and hands him a football. Not long after, the game continues, and Isaiah clutches the game with an amazing touchdown win. However, while the stadium erupts in joy, Isaiah goes down with a dangerous injury, and Cameron gets to watch his favorite hero risk missing his final season before retirement. Nevertheless, his father still justifies Isaiah's winning sacrifice, encouraging his son to believe in himself by teaching him chants to make him believe he's the next GOAT, and young Cameron grows up believing just that. 14 years later, Isaiah, who's already recovered from his proposed career-ending injury, wins his 8th ring for the Saviors and makes headlines all month. As the celebrations ensue, everyone keeps asking who the next GOAT will be, as it appears that Isaiah, who's now 45, is nearing retirement. While some think Isaiah's still got one more year in him, others figure the next in line for the GOAT title is none other than Cameron Cade, the most naturally gifted quarterback of the new generation, who's actually being noticed by the big leagues. One evening, after Cameron returns from college, a reporter stages an interview in Cameron's home with his mother, Yvette, right beside him. After asking both of them some generic interview questions, the reporter asks Cameron if he has all it takes to become the next GOAT, and he basically says yes. Later that night, Cameron stays back late in the training field to train and practice his throws after his coach leaves him there. At one point in his training, however, he makes a weird throw that causes the poles and ball to keep vibrating and rolling on its tips, respectively. This is obviously very weird, so Cameron, curious, stops training for a bit and walks to the ball to check it out. Soon after eyeing the oddball, he picks it up and gets hit hard in the head from behind with a chisel being held by a very eerie goat-like humanoid figure. Hours later, Cameron wakes up in the hospital with medical staples holding his fractured skull together, and his mother arguing quietly with the doctor. Seconds later, Yvette approaches the young man and assures him that they'll get a second doctor's opinion to know if he can still play at the Combine, a scouting football event for college athletes. Several days later, Cameron attends the Combine nonetheless, with his family members and his agent, Tom, and acts very chill. Moments before his press conference begins, while getting his hair cut, Drew argues with Yvette, their mom, over her worrisome attitude about Cameron, and accidentally touches Cameron's stitches with the clippers. Although the resulting pain causes Cameron to bleed, he assures his mother that he's more than ready for the Combine. That being said, Cameron lets Tom handle the press conference to avoid being seen with the wound, and Tom does a good job fending off the wolves. About 30 minutes later, Cameron misses the Combine's main event all because of the wound, and instead, spends the entire evening inside the dark tunnel leading to the main arena. Along the line, while he watches the others, he hears bleeding sounds further down the tunnel and walks towards the darkness to check it out. There, he finds a weird dude with odd paintings all over his body trying to give him an object, and he takes it. Hours later, after the Combine, Cameron attends one of Drew's deadbeat friends' after parties to cool off and vent out his frustration. After getting a pep talk from his girlfriend, Jasmine, Cameron gets approached by a Nimrod to buy some jewelry, but he rejects the offer and instead goes to the bathroom. At the door, Drew, whom he pushed off earlier, approaches and informs him that he has a phone call from his agent, Tom. After he picks up the call, Tom tells Cameron that he's managed to talk Isaiah and the Savior's owner into giving him another shot. However, for that to happen, he needs to go down to Isaiah's place in the desert and train with him for a week. Hearing this, Cameron asks all the necessary questions first, and eventually agrees to go train with his GOAT. Days later, he hits the dusty, desert road, driving past the ugly and disgusting hillbilly fan cults, who all hate him, and ultimately ends up arriving at Isaiah's state-of-the-art home. In his first moments at Isaiah's house, Cameron takes in the beautiful architecture and checks out Isaiah's on-display 8 rings before finally finding the man himself carving out sculptures from some animal bones and leather. Their first meetup is warm, with Isaiah praising Cameron's swinging arm and apologizing for the mess he made. But when Cameron asks about the animal carcasses on the table, Isaiah tells him an odd story about a fictional football game instead. After the story, he confiscates Cameron's phone, claiming that it's to make him focus on the training for the rest of the week, and then takes Cameron into his in-house training field to train with him for the rest of the day. Shortly after their first fun training session together, Cameron stretches for a bit, and then meets Isaiah's sports medicine doctor, Marco. After all the niceties, Marco realigns Cameron's shoulder joints, and has the 6'5" guy remove all his clothes so he can examine his physicals. While he's at it, Cameron tells Isaiah about how his father used to look up to him back when he was alive. But Isaiah instead tells him that his father was pretty much a deadbeat who caused him to go the extra mile just to be the GOAT at the sport. Along the line, the headstrong GOAT lets Cameron know that family's not the only thing that'll get him to the GOAT level. What really matters to transcend the game is that insane desire deep within that drives him. Having said all that, Marco ends the physical examination and tells Cameron to get his clothes back on, which he does. A few minutes later, Cameron walks in on Elsie White, Isaiah's wife, as she films a commercial for one of her whack erotic toy products, exchanges a few introductory words with her, and says his goodbyes. Later that evening, Cameron gets in an ice bath to cool off, but before long, while he chills out in the bath, he spots Isaiah nearby getting his blood drawn by Marco, and asks about it. Long story short, Isaiah says he's saving his blood for rainy days when he's tired and wants to train extra hard. Cameron asks if it's legal to get his blood drawn like that, but Isaiah instead asks if he wants a hit. As soon as Cameron says no, Isaiah leaves the room and urges Marco to take care of Cameron while he's gone. Seconds later, while yapping some stupid stuff about the primal urge and whatnot, Marco hurriedly injects some of Isaiah's blood into Cameron without seeking his permission and leaves. Once he's gone, Cameron dunks his head further inside the ice bath, and suddenly wakes up the next day after the idiot Malik nearly drowns him. Upon preparing for the day, Cameron goes on a morning run in the desert for miles with Isaiah, until he finally stops to catch a breath. Seconds after stopping, Cameron throws up and lies on the ground. Just then, a weird masquerade figure holding a weapon approaches him and smashes his head. At that point, Cameron wakes up to realize that he's just hallucinating, and then finds Isaiah urging him to breathe till help comes. By the time help arrives, Isaiah gets Cameron treated and back to the training field to continue training. Minutes before training continues, Cameron consumes some pure oxygen and discusses some random stuff with his mentor. Somewhere along the line, he notices a bunch of shirtless dudes walking into the training field and asks Isaiah about them. Isaiah says they're just a bunch of free agents with nothing to lose, coming to play catch with them, and then leaves to welcome them. Seconds later, creepy Marco pops up behind Cameron and injects him with some of Isaiah's blood a second time, after which he tells Cameron that it's gonna be a long week and leaves. Not long after getting the second blood dosage, Cameron gets really active and joins Isaiah and the free agents to play catch. Upon playing light a few times, Isaiah switches things up a little. He sets a 2-second timer for Cameron to throw the ball into a free agent's hand. But to make him take the training more seriously, he places a volunteer right in front of a high-speed ball shooting machine. Each time Cameron throws a failed pass, the volunteer gets hit in the face by a speeding ball. With the stage set, a terrified Cameron closes his eyes and, on Isaiah's mark, makes the first throw. Thankfully, one of the agents catches it, but on the third throw, Cameron makes a failed pass, and he gets to watch the volunteer from earlier get slammed really hard in the face by the high-speed ball. Confused, Cameron tries to figure out what the hell's going on, but Isaiah throws him another hut to make a pass, and he fails yet again. With the tension rising, Cameron watches the volunteer get hit in the face a second time, and this really messes up his mental state, as the volunteer soon starts bleeding. As such, to keep the volunteer from getting hit even more, he locks in and does his best to keep making successful passes, only to mess it up a few more times, and watch the volunteer get hit even more. Eventually, after so many failed passes in a row, Cameron crashes out at the receivers Isaiah's given him and nearly gets in a fight with one of them. Before that happens, however, Isaiah stops him from crashing out and gives him a little pep talk. After the pep talk, Cameron gets even more serious with practice and actually manages to make a good throw. As soon as he gets his break, he rushes over to the injured volunteer and checks up on him. To his surprise, the bloody volunteer gets back on his feet, with one of his teeth missing, and salutes Isaiah for giving him the opportunity. Upon chit-chatting with the injured guy, Isaiah leaves with the rest for their lunch break, and Cameron gets his stitched wound dress by Marco, who tells him a weird story. Right after getting his stitches restitched, Cameron chills out in the hyperbaric chamber for the rest of the evening and talks about the injured volunteer for a few minutes with Isaiah. Let's just say Isaiah doesn't care about the guy, so instead of talking about the guy, he tells Cameron just how high priority football is for him. Once he's done, he leaves, and Cameron chills out in the hyperbaric chamber for a few more seconds, slowly losing his mind as the pressure in the chamber drops and causes him to hallucinate. The following morning, Cameron wakes up feeling great for day 3. Upon getting his daily blood injection, he returns to training and plays pretty heavily with the boys. Along the line, Bro gets hit so badly that the fracture in his head happens all over again, and he coughs up blood. Isaiah sees Cameron spitting blood, but rather than feel sorry for him, he condemns him for being soft instead, and then urges him to sacrifice even more things so he can become better than his pathetic father. Having heard all that, Cameron returns to the field more hyped than before, and so he continues playing until he ultimately ends up colliding with and crushing one of his training partner's skull. When the guy collapses and has a seizure, Cameron realizes he's messed up, but even still, Isaiah just walks over to the collapsed dude, checks him out for a few, hugs Cameron, and tells him how proud he is to see that killer in him. Afterward, the entire team comes together for a huddle cheer and ends the day on a good note, with the seizure guy still on the floor. Later that night, while exploring other parts of the home, Cameron hallucinates yet again. But thankfully, this time around, he snaps out of it and hops on a secret phone call with his family using a payphone in a dimly lit room, only to find out that it's Yvette's birthday. Anyway, he tells his family about his hallucinations and headaches. But while Drew tries giving him some BS remedy for his headaches, Yvette gets on the phone and asks why Cameron hasn't been answering his phone all week. As Cameron explains the reason why, a drunk Marco appears in the room, causing Cameron to hang up the phone, and he starts yapping in parables about how he's killing himself by doing Isaiah's business. To avoid oversharing, Cameron asks Marco for some medicine for his headaches and, upon telling Cameron some things about his talent, and just how well he's prepared him, Marco gives him the medicine and leaves after saying even more weird stuff. What Cameron didn't know at the moment was that he was being stalked by an obsessed fan named Marjorie. But for now, he chills out in the sauna with Isaiah and keeps asking the goat even more questions, like what it's like being one. Well, Isaiah tells him that he used to think being the goat was the best thing to happen in his life. But now that he has to give it all up, he's been having nightmares about watching someone doing what he's very good at and stealing all his glory. Having said all that, Isaiah tells Cameron about all the things he'll miss about football when he's gone, including his family, and the duo jokes around for a few more minutes. When they both get serious again, Isaiah tells Cameron to be much better than him when he gets to his status, and Cameron, confused, asks what he means. At this point, Isaiah obviously can't tell the protagonist what's coming for him, so he instead asks him a paradoxical question about getting freed from prison or receiving food to survive while in there, and leaves to watch some tape. A few moments later, as the sauna gets hotter, Cameron lies down to rest. Before long, Marjorie, the obsessed Isaiah fan, slowly creeps out from under the sitting area in the sauna with both her sons outside the house, roams the space for a few seconds, and raises her stone to smash Cameron's head. Luckily, Cameron wakes up in time, so he dodges the attack, grabs the lady, and strangles her till she passes out. Around that same time, Isaiah returns to the sauna, pissed at Marjorie for being this obnoxious, and ultimately ends up unliving her when she tries to attack Cameron again. Upon ending the weird woman, Isaiah praises himself for unliving her, and then starts making some sort of weird parables out of the nonsense he just did. Eventually, he tells Cameron to leave the sauna so he can clean up his mess. But Cameron meets with Elsie right after to tell her what he just witnessed. Elsie tells him that what happened is just a regular Tuesday to them, so there's absolutely no reason why Cameron should be leaving them. That being said, she also tells him Isaiah is probably jealous that Cameron will soon take over him. But before Cameron even thinks to understand what the hell she's saying, Elsie invites Cameron to the pool to party with the girls. And Cameron ultimately spends the rest of the night partying with the girls, all while recalling his mother's well wishes to him. Very early the next morning, Cameron wakes up beside Elsie and a few other girls, and spots Isaiah with a gun, sitting on the couch just right in front of him, asking if he had intercourse with his wife or any of the girls. Scared for his life, Cameron assures Isaiah that he has a girlfriend, Jasmine, whom he's had since high school, so he has no business with his wife. Even still, Isaiah condemns him for being loyal to his girlfriend, making funny noises, and acting like he was joking. Eventually, he apologizes for acting like a bastard and then lets him know that if he's too afraid to hurt his girl's feelings, then he's not a real killer because they have to not care about who they hurt and whatnot. Having said all that, Isaiah takes Cameron to a makeshift shooting range in the desert to shoot at still-life targets. Shortly after sinking bullets into a few of them, Isaiah has his lackeys switch him up. While they're at it, he asks Cameron if he's doing good, and Cameron says he's thinking about the weird lady he almost killed the previous night. Initially, Isaiah pretends not to know about the lady he's talking about. However, after shooting some more targets, he remembers her and gives Cameron the gun to shoot at one of the targets. Cameron handles the gun with good form, but as he's about to shoot, Isaiah distracts him, and he misses. Thereafter, He makes a wager with Cameron to give his broke self anything he wants if he can make the next shot: houses, cars, women, and everything else. If he loses the shot, however, Isaiah says he'll take Cameron's youth. To his dismay, Cameron refuses his handouts and instead tells Isaiah that he'll let him keep QB1 the following year if he misses the shot. This strikes a nerve with Isaiah, but Cameron, who didn't give a damn, takes aim and ultimately makes the shot. Hours later, by nightfall, Cameron returns to the gym, takes his usual bloodshot, and trains like crazy. Afterward, he chills out in the hyperbaric chamber and relives all the defining moments of his life. The following day, which is day 5, Isaiah and Elsie arrange an interview in the house, so Cameron can tell the whole world, as well as the Savior's owners, his origin story. In the initial parts of the interview, Cameron shows off for the camera, and Isaiah narrates some stuff about how fathers of the olden days turned boys into men. Once the show-off's done, Cameron tells the world his sob story, citing just how hard his dad would make him train just to be good at football, and Isaiah just sits there, watching his apprentice cry his heart out as he relives the horrible memories of his father's death. A few minutes later, after his little speech, Cameron hits the gym again. But this time around, Elsie approaches him and urges him to take things easy, as the sacrifice he's about to take won't be worth it if his heart's not in it. After Cameron assures her that he's very ready for what's coming, Elsie invites him to a party so he can meet with the real owners of the Savior's team and, if possible, sign the same deal Isaiah signed with them 20 years ago. Clearly, Cameron can't say no, so he goes with Elsie alone to the weird, underground party. On their way to the venue, a confused Cameron asks Elsie why they're at a freaking gas station when they're supposed to be at a bar or something, and Elsie says it's because these power players need to keep their privacy intact. Plus, with all the weird rituals they're so used to conducting, it's only a given that they maintain their animosity. That being said, Elsie tells Cameron all he needs to know to pacify the elderly man, who owns the Savior's team, as well as his fat, pudgy kid. Right before they enter, Cameron asks what Elsie meant by rituals earlier, but Elsie says it's just rich guy stuff. Not long after, the duo enters the secret underground nightclub of the ultra-rich and explores the place for a few seconds. Before long, Marco shows up, babbles some gibberish to Cameron, but then, before leaving, tells him to run now while he still has the chance. Of course, Cameron doesn't understand that, so before Marco keeps filling his head with other things, Elsie pulls Cameron away and makes Tom introduce him to the owner of the Savior's team, as well as his board of directors. After all the chit-chat, Tom asks Cameron if he's ready to take the next step. To prove that he is indeed ready, Cameron drinks all the wine he was given, which coincidentally wakes Isaiah up wherever he is to begin training, and continues partying really hard all night. While he's busy partying, Elsie beheads Marco behind the scenes, places his head inside a goat-like helmet, and places it on a table in another room. When Cameron accidentally sees Marco's head inside the helmet, he throws up, goes into a trance, spitting out a necklace, and ultimately passes out from all the overwhelming experiences. In time, day 6 arrives, and it's time for Cameron to make the sacrifice to become the GOAT. At around midnight on the 6th day, he wakes up on a medical table, with lasers scanning his entire body, after receiving his final dosage of Isaiah's blood. Although confused, Cameron removes the syringe supplying blood to his body, and soon spots an adrenaline syringe on a table nearby. With every last bit of strength, he pulls himself off the operating bed, crawls to the table, grabs the adrenaline syringe, and injects all its contents into himself. Almost immediately, his body jerks back awake, and so Cameron walks himself to a random room where he finds Isaiah sitting in the center, watching a large screen over his head. Upon noticing him, Isaiah says he's just watching some tape as usual, but Cameron doesn't say anything and instead attacks him. Without fail, Isaiah dodges the first attack and pushes Cameron away, but just as Cameron's about to leave the room, the entrance door slams shut, leaving both goats to brawl their differences out. Cameron calls out Isaiah for chickening out at the most crucial moment, but Isaiah makes fun of him for not having what it takes to be the greatest. Eventually, before they battle, Isaiah reveals that Cameron's been receiving the good stuff, aka blood of all the USFF goats before them, just like he's been doing the same thing, all to keep the tradition alive. When Cameron asks for clarity, Isaiah tells him that this tradition's been around since the beginning of the league. Whoever has the blood of the former GOAT flowing through his veins is considered the chosen one. As such, if Cameron wants to be the next GOAT, then they need to fight each other to the death, so he can take it from Isaiah. With the tension in the room rising, Cameron tells Isaiah that he did nothing to earn his GOAT title, but Isaiah mocks all of Cameron's efforts, telling him he's nothing but a little boy who believes naive things. Having said all that, and a lot more, Isaiah screams out and approaches Cameron slowly. When he gets close enough, Cameron punches him, drawing first blood, and the duo starts their fated battle. In the battle's first half, Cameron gets the upper hand, but before long, Isaiah regains control and beats the crap out of poor Cameron. Ultimately, as both sides reach their peak, Isaiah breaks Cameron's legs, rendering him immobile. But rather than give up on the battle, Cameron drags himself back up, desperately searching for a weapon, and grabs a helmet to protect himself. Seconds later, Isaiah charges at him from behind, but Cameron hits him with the helmet, and then bashes his head till Isaiah draws his final breath. Soon after killing Isaiah, Cameron walks out of the tunnel and finds himself in a massive football field with weird cheerleaders and the owners of the Saviors team, dressed in very eerie, lifelike animal costumes, chanting some sort of ritualistic incantations. For a few seconds, he plays along and pretends to be under their spell, as he approaches the weird, demonic circle with statues around it in the middle of the field. When the chanting stops, Cameron spots Elsie sitting on a table up front, with a large book in front of her, almost as if she were waiting for him to do something. Before long, Tom, who sits amongst the Savior's owners, also dressed in the pig-head costume, tells him to sign the contract to receive the gifts, and Cameron pauses for a second to rethink his decision. Upon waiting for too long, the owners get impatient, and Tom removes his pig's mask to tell Cameron that he's been training his entire life for that exact moment. While he continues yapping, Cameron spots a picture with his younger self, his dad, and the freaking Savior's owner somewhere around him and bursts into a hysterical laugh. Then, he picks up the axe with a mad grin on his face and curses both Tom and all the rest of the owners. Pissed, Tom blatantly tells Cameron that he's been groomed ever since he was a child to become the next GOAT, so he shouldn't get ahead of himself, thinking he only got to that stage with hard work. Not long after, the impatient owner threatens to kill Cameron's family if he doesn't sign the contract. But even at that, Cameron just stands there, axe in hand, and recalls every single memory he's had training with his family and dad up until that point. By the time he remembers his mother's voice, Cameron refuses to sign the contract and instead dodges Malek's attack from behind and kills him like clockwork. As the chaos ensues, Elsie gets up to kill Cameron herself, but she trips and stabs herself on the way. Around the same time, the owners with their little pig masks try to run to their little havens. However, Cameron chases after them and starts unliving them one by one, till he gets to the real owner of the Savior's team, whom he unalives slowly and painfully. At that point, the god they all worship finally arrives at the training field, demanding its sacrifice, but since Tom's still alive, Cameron offers him up as the sacrifice himself. After refusing to kill the Nimrod, Cameron watches as Tom gets dragged by the god into the magic circle and then torn apart to become the next sacrifice. As soon as the sacrifice is done, Cameron walks out of the field like a freaking boss, and lives to play another day. In the end, Cameron realized that chasing greatness under the wrong mentor can twist you into someone you barely recognize. And sometimes, the real danger isn't the training, but the person leading it. But what do you think? Were his actions in the end justified, or did he cross a line he'll never be able to step back from? Let me know down in the comments.